Practically speaking, there's no way to avoid conflicts of interest, full stop. We really just have to hope that the people we put into public office, that we elect to public office, act with integrity.
We just have to hope that our elected officials don't act corrupt. But I thought that hope was not a plan.
But hope is not a plan.
But what isn't a plan either is keeping Canadians hostage against the United States for the last 2 years, crippling our national economy in the process, only to roll around, open wide, and, well, stick around to see what this boondoggle is all about. But spoiler alert, it's not a good look for Carney at all. But it's not all bad news because Canada actually recorded quite the win, and I couldn't be happier to report on it finally. But as usual, there's certain things the headlines don't want you to know. My name is Eli Daniel, and this is The Right Call. Like, share, subscribe, hype this video up. Any interaction on this channel helps push the truth out and maybe someday help break that CBC-induced coma that so many Canadians are under. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button, because if you like the truth, you found the right place. What's this magic bag on your shoulder, you might ask? How did you bust your back and your shoulder, you might ask? Was it some beautiful, crazy adventure? Nah, sadly, I just slept wrong. Welcome to life when you're over 35 years old. Well, remember that Canadian woman who was interning at the NATO headquarters in Belgium who was arrested on charges of espionage? Well, we learned two things recently. The first, she's actually a Chinese-Canadian dual national. Great. The second, she was spying on behalf of China. I did not see that one coming. She was also listed as an election volunteer working for the Liberal Party of Canada. In between MP Michael Ma pushing the lies that the Chinese are not interning the Uyghur people into work camps, and then the fact that we've allowed a bunch of Chinese EVs to flood a market and perhaps even spy on us, and then that secret CSIS report that says that China has interfered in our last two elections, and that several MPs and government officials might be co-opted. Well, now we got another little conspiracy theory to add to the list. An intern working for the Liberals that is actually a spy, a confirmed spy for China. Great, amazing. Well, it seems that after nearly 2 years of elbows up rhetoric that's produced no result, Mark Carney has had enough of being embarrassed and is finally willing to seriously negotiate with the Americans.
Katie Simpson is standing by right now. Okay, so there is some news here to report. Katie, you've spoken to some sources. What can you tell us?
Yeah, for the first time, we're getting a snapshot as to what is happening behind closed doors when it comes to those high and very high stakes talks between Canada and the United States.
I'm just surprised there are high stakes talk, because we've been told for the longest time by both the Americans and the Canadians that they weren't talking.
Donald Trump's tariff threat, his latest tariff threat, sort of looms over this country. A couple of things before I get into the specific details we need to say. All of the information I'm about to share is according to two industry sources that CBC News is granting anonymity to in order to discuss sensitive ongoing negotiations.
I can guarantee you this was leaked directly from the Prime Minister's office, and you'll see why in 1 second. But the best way I want you to imagine this Katie right now is, you know, the gloves they use in cattle farming, you know, the glove that they put on before they do the insertion in the behind. Well, this is what they're about to do to us with a narrative. So that's why I think the PMO gave those talking points and said, all right, lube it up for the Canadians. They need to hear this.
What's going on here? So we're finally starting to get a sense of what specifically the Canadians are asking for and what the Canadians are willing to give up in order to sort of ease this ongoing trade war. We are told, according to two industry sources, that Canada is willing to make some changes when it comes to the alcohol bans to meet the American demands to remove, to ban American booze on Canadian shelves. Also willing to.
And this is something that I've been calling for forever. After I had the chance to meet with the US ambassador to Canada, Pete Oakstra, that's the one thing he made known and clear. It's a trade irritant. It's not a big deal economically for the US. It represents a few $100 million a year for the US. It's chump change for them. But it's the messaging. It's the idea. It's effectively the optics that they hated. And Canada, for some reason, saw this as a point of pride. We're going to buy Canadian products, even though they're 100 million times more expensive, which is crazy. Think about it for a second. It's more expensive for Canadian brewers and distillers to sell to Canadians than it is to sell to Americans. But conversation for another time. Glad that we're willing to finally play ball. This is such a tiny little issue, and I don't understand why it took us this long to come to our senses.
To meet some demands when it comes to lifting tariffs on the auto sector and making some changes when it comes to the dairy sector. However, not anything to do with the dismantling of supply management.
Oh, no. We have to reassure Canadians, don't worry, your precious supply management will stay in place. You will continue to be squeezed out of your precious Canadian buckaroos when you buy milk and cheese and butter and all dairy products, because we are keeping the supply management in place. We got to protect our dairy. We got to protect it.
That remains a firm thing that the Canadian government is not going to be changing, but willing to meet some American demands when it comes to quota systems and how dairy is sort of viewed in Canadian shelves. But the big headline out of that really nasty sticking point that the Americans don't like, the Canadians have indicated to the Americans that they are willing to give up on those booze bans if they get something in exchange. Now, what are the Canadians pushing for? What we are told, again, according to these two industry sources, is the main thing Canada is pushing for in this moment. They do not want those new tariffs, the 50% tariffs on some Canadian goods that are set to come into effect on August 19th. Those cannot come into effect.
Yeah, no shit. That would completely decimate the Canadian economy. We are on life support right now. Canada is economically on life support. So a fresh round of 50% tariffs on a bunch of non-CUSMA USMCA protected goods would be the end. It would be a nail in the coffin. So yes, Carney saw the light because, well, we are literally already in a recession, but we are teetering on the edge of catastrophe.
Been expressed to the Americans that is sort of viewed as a make or break moment. If the Americans go ahead and put those new tariffs on, there will be no political space in Canada to get back to any sort of negotiations.
You see the spin there. We got to look like we're strong men. No. This, if those tariffs came into place, we wouldn't negotiate with America because we wouldn't have a country anymore. So, of course, I'll let CBC slide. You know, it's okay. Again, lube it up, ram it in. Supply management for dairy is not being touched. And, of course, we would have cut off the U.S. once again had they put those 50% tariffs. Of course, it's not us begging for her life at this point. Don't worry. It's all good. Between you and me, we understand what's going on, but we'll let Katie here continue to lube it up.
It will be a very difficult pill for Canadians to swallow, and there won't be the political appetite to sort of engage in that way. The other thing the Canadians...
There won't be any political appetite because people's appetite will be on the fact that they're starving. Their appetite will be, I just want food.
Canadians are seeking for are lower tariff rates when it comes to those sectorial tariffs on steel, on aluminum, on the lumber industry, those kinds of tariffs. They're called 232 tariffs. The Canadians are looking for lower rates, the best rate of any country in the world at this point, because the Americans have said to the Canadians, under no circumstance will there be no tariff when it comes to that. As long as President Donald Trump is the president, there are going to be these kinds of tariffs.
But I thought we had the best deal. We'll come back to that. But I thought we had the best deal.
Canada is seeking a better rate, a lower rate. And that's something that they're pushing for. Another thing the Canadians have asked for is they want a joint statement so that when the joint statement saying Canada and the U.S., they are going to be pushing ahead with those CUSMA review talks in a formal way. Remember, Mexico and the United States, they have been holding formal negotiations to ensure the free trade agreement between all three countries remains in place. It's sort of in a state of limbo.
Imagine the state of our country when one of your requests, one of your demands, you're negotiating really hard. It's like, one thing I absolutely want, we need to put out a joint statement saying that we are formally negotiating because you've been embarrassed so badly when all other nations, and I mean all other nations, have been negotiating with the U.S. and coming up to deals. Mexico has been eating your lunch when it comes to negotiating with Trump. And here you are, you're like, I want a statement too that says like, we're negotiating formally. Sure. Take the statement, man. God, this is all about PR with this government. It's all about announcements, statements, committees. It's never about getting anything done, but you know, as long as we have our statements.
Right now, as it's sort of reviewed and all countries are deciding what they're going to do next, Canada wants to remain in the deal. It wants to keep the United States in that deal. And so one thing that Canada wants in this moment is that the Americans to come out and say, alongside the Canadians, that yes, we are going to push ahead. We're going to get that review, those formal negotiations related to the trade deal underway.
Well, look how far we've come since being told that we would get a deal with the United States by July of last year, 2025. Here's an official statement from the Prime Minister's office, dated June 16th, 2025, saying that to that end, the leaders agreed to pursue negotiations toward a deal within the coming 30 days. Well, it's been more than 300 days, but hey, sometimes things take a little bit longer, especially when you take a little wrong turn and go a little too deep with your elbows up. But my favorite is the fact that we're looking for lower sectorial tariffs because, well, apparently we're being decimated, crushed under them, which is true. We've been saying that for a while. But I want to bring your attention to the hypocrisy here, because we've been told time and time and time again that Canada has the best deal. We're the best deal. That's why we don't have to negotiate with the US. We already have the best deal. Here's a post on Facebook from Mark Carney himself directly, and I quote, "Canada currently has the best trade deal with the United States. 85% of our exports to the US are tariff-free. To preserve Canada's unique advantage, we're matching the US by removing our tariffs on US goods covered by USMCA. The US never put tariffs on USMCA covered goods, but we did. And the gaslighting began. So yes, we did start this trade war. We did attack the US more than they attacked us, but we had the best deal. Well, apparently not. So let's examine what other concessions Canada is likely to make in order not to get slapped with a fresh round of new tariffs. So aside from removing Canadian retaliatory auto tariff, very high likelihood that we remove it. Removal of retaliatory steel tariff, removal of retaliatory aluminum tariff, foreign US alcohol to provincial liquor systems, changes to the dairy allocation rules without touching the quota system, of course, but some changes there. Allow retailers greater access to dairy quotas, okay, and eliminate discriminatory provincial procurement rules targeting US suppliers. So in short, we're giving up everything, and in exchange, actually getting nothing. We're just not getting an extra layer of tariff slapped on us. And this is a massive win for the US, and quite an embarrassment for Canada, but at least we are heading in the right direction. We're finally engaging in trade talks. It was about time. And to me, all this crap is absolutely crazy because it could have been avoided over a year ago had we just done what every other nation has done. Sit down with the United States and negotiate in good faith. But instead, because before it gets memory hold, the US did not attack Canada or single us out. Rather, President Trump came into office and implemented a brand new trade strategy centered around tariffs, and then he tariffs the entire world.
But what I do know, as the trade guy, is that Canada retaliated. The only other country in the world who retaliated on tariffs was the Chinese. And so if the president's going to take an action and the Canadians retaliate, the United States needs to maintain the integrity of our action, the effectiveness, so we have to go up too.
Yep, that's right. The entire world just negotiated with Trump, but Canada and China, again, the ties between Canada and China here are uncanny, I'm just putting it out there, but decided to retaliate. And well, the past is history, or the rest is history. We know what it's led to. Canada entering a recession, our economy getting completely crushed, and lots of elbows going way up, a little too high up. Perhaps that's what I did. Perhaps I put my elbow a little too up, and look at what it's led me to.
You heard Ambassador Greer say because Canada retaliated to the initial tariffs all the way back in April when Prime Minister Trudeau was in office, you're paying the price now, even though you have a new government in place. If that's the issue, why not make that concession and pull back?
So Prime Minister Carney, our new Prime Minister, has, we think, built a very business-like, respectful relationship with President Trump. We think that's obviously very important to Canada, and we think to the United States.
Well, it turns out that was a lie, because this video that aired a year ago made it out to be that Carney and Trump were buddy-buddies, that Carney was such a businessman that would get a deal in no time. And here we are a year later, and we're pretty much bending over and conceding on everything in exchange for simply not being slapped with new tariffs, and maybe negotiating finally in good faith towards getting a more permanent deal with the US. This should come as a wake-up call to the liberal base that their anti-American sentiment was not only ill-fated, but oh so counterproductive. Alas, I won't hold my breath, because there's no one better in this world than justifying their own lunacy than the liberal base. They will find an excuse, they'll deflect, they'll tap themselves on the back, and tell themselves that they did the right thing, even though it cost us over a year, probably hundreds of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in our economy, and people suffered in the meantime. Oh well, I'm just happy that we're finally moving in the right direction. So speaking of right direction, I've been waiting to finally be able to report on some good news. Really, it's kind of depressing to report constantly on Canada's downfall, but when a good news shows up, let's all rejoice. Today's Canadian Labor Force Survey report was actually very good. Employment increased by 75,000 jobs in July, and the unemployment rate fell to 6.4%. That is still a considerable amount higher, about 30% higher than the US, but it's in the right direction. Honestly, reading this, I worry that we've set our standards so low and got accustomed to a benchmark of mediocrity so bad that now, when things are moving in the way they should, we're like, oh, finally, it's like the Messiah. But again, I got to constantly bring myself back to comparing ourselves to, our peers and realize that the US unemployment rate is indeed 4% and we're at 6.4. But regardless, let's not ruin this right now, okay? The biggest positive was that the job growth was in the private sector, which is that's good for once. It's not just the government hiring more bureaucrats at the tits of the taxpayer. And to make it even better, public sector employment is at its lowest levels in 11 months because in the job report, we discovered that public sector jobs actually fell by 27,000 jobs and some change, which is a great news. I would normally never celebrate the loss of any employment. But when it comes to bureaucrats, I am jubilating. This is a good start, a great start, but there needs to be many, many, many more. See, public sector employment is too high. And the issue is that right now in Canada, roughly 20% of jobs are in the public sector, which means 20% of employees are fed by the government. Now, the government makes its money how? You and me paying taxes. So, in short, a public sector job requires anywhere between 2 to 4 private sector jobs to fund it. It's unsustainable. You cannot generate wealth in a country by having too many bureaucrats. And our public sector was so bloated, but if you look at this graph right now, we are actually starting to drop from a 30-year high in public sector employment. Again, great start, but we need to slash heavily in the public sector. Yes, it means that it will be short-term pain. There will be plenty of people losing their jobs, and I do sympathize for them. It's not their fault. But for the well-being of the nation in general, it needs to happen. There's no ifs or buts. It's the only path forward. Plus, let's be honest, a public sector job does not really create any value and wealth in society. It's an administrative job. It manages, it operates the government, which doesn't create any value. So hopefully after a couple of years, things will balance out. These people will find employment in the private sector. Some might even start businesses. And now all of a sudden, we are producing net positive for GDP. We are producing value that other countries can buy, value that brings benefits and innovation to the country. Now, at the sector level, it was more good news because, and this is important. Sometimes these job reports come out and it turns out it's just like, I don't know, like food and beverages, basically like temporary staffing needs for the summer, which we saw in June, for example. But in this instance, most of the jobs were in the goods and service producing industry, which is good. Trade rose, finance, insurance, and real estate rose, professional, scientific, and technical services rose, construction rose, manufacturing rose, business and other support services rose, healthcare and social assistant, transport, warehousing, education service. This is good news. However, there is a very important part that the headlines have not mentioned, and it deserves serious attention. Canada's population of individuals older than 15 years old increased over the last year by roughly 200,000 individuals, but the labor force only increased by 91,000. So what does it mean? Well, it means that all of the population increase in that age bracket came from immigration, and that, sadly, and this is horrible, nearly half of the people we let in could not find a job, and they became thus a drain on society. Which also means that the domestic Canadians aged over 15 are having to compete with more individuals for jobs and sadly are not finding them. So it's not to rain on the entire parade here, but in the spirit of telling you the truth, which I promise to always do, I had to bring it up. Now, something that should infuriate every Canadian, and yet it doesn't, which I don't understand, is the fact that the Carney government updated the interim federal health program to fully cover items such as respiratory devices, implantable hearing aids, nursing homes, and hospital rehab, reversing parts of May's copay introduction. If you recall, this was a huge boondoggle back in May, whereas it was discovered that refugees and migrants were getting much better hospital and healthcare treatments than Canadians were. So Carney had to do something, and he said, okay, from now on, you will have to pay 30% out of pocket of all these special treatments you're getting, instead of getting the best golden service that even we don't get, but that we surely pay for on their behalf. But here's the thing, the Toronto Star is not telling you. They're making it seem like this only applies to refugees, legitimate claimants. However, the supplementary benefit are not being restored for refugees, but for people whose refugee claims have been rejected or not yet heard, aka for bogus claims. That's right, you can come to Canada, make a bogus claim, and during the time you wait for your claim to be assessed, you're being treated to the golden treatment that we don't even get. That includes people who came into Canada, invented fake stories of persecution that were rejected even by our own now extremely gullible asylum process, and are now overstaying to abuse, Canada's generosity. It also includes tens of thousands of people who came here during the Trudeau wave of temporary foreign workers and that are on temporary student visas because, yes, on temporary student visas, they get better treatment than you and I do. And tying up loose ends, Dougie Ford, the closeted Liberal of Ontario, writes a letter to Carney asking him to extend the gas and diesel excise tax holiday to January 1st. Because make no mistake, that 10 cents drop in gas price that you saw for a couple weeks only to have the gas price shoot right the hell back up, well, that's going away in like 4 weeks. And then after that, guess what? 10 cents more, baby. We're going to be over $2 a liter at that point. So Ford is scrambling to beg Carney not to do that because, of course, it probably does not bode well for, someone who supported Carney so damn much. Another thing that doesn't bode well, and I can't believe I'm about to read this, but Canada Border Service Agency chartered a Dassault Falcon 900EX, a private jet, favored by the super rich, to deport 3 individuals from Canada in January 2022 at a cost of nearly $500,000. We spent $500,000 to deport 3 people. Why? Like a Air Transat flight was not available. Air Canada economy, basic economy class tickets were not available. Again, it's the constant, why are we treating others so much better than ours? I don't remember the last time the government bought me a private jet freaking trip. But you know what? If that's what's needed to deport people who are illegally in the country, God. Government efficiency here is off the chart. This brings back to the whole bureaucrats, right? We've lost 27,000 bureaucrat jobs. This is why we need a lot more. These are the kinds of decisions that bureaucrats make. We have 3 illegals that we're kicking out of the country at last. How do we get them out? How about Air Canada? Have you ever heard of Dassault Falcon? Those jets, baby. Ooh, like, come on. And somewhat unforeseen departure from a Conservative MP, Larry Brock, who is a veteran of the justice system. Here's a little bit of his resume. He was the vice chair of the Justice and Human Rights Committee. He was the shadow minister for justice and attorney general and deputy shadow minister within the Conservative Party. He was associated shadow minister for Indigenous Services. He was assistant crown attorney for Brent before entering politics, and he led the Conservative justice line in the House of Commons. So Larry Brock is retiring from politics to go back to law enforcement, or the legal system, I should say. He's going back to the Crown Prosecutor's office. And from what I've seen, he is tough on crime, and I think this is exactly the kind of Crown Prosecutor we should hope and wish to have in Canada. Now, if only we also had judges that applied the law equally to people, whether they're Canadian or foreigners. But of course, the mainstream media spun this as some form of crisis of the Conservative Party, another attack on Poilievre's leadership. Listen to this little segment. Listen to the language they use. It's always coded language meant to nudge people's opinion into a negative direction.
Good morning, I'm Susan Ormiston. Also making news this morning, Ontario Conservative MP Larry Brock has announced he's going to resign from Parliament next.
God, could they choose any more flattering images and zoom in slower to his what appears to be very joyful face? I would like to compare it to when Guilbeault resigned. I'm really curious what kind of pictures they use. I'm sure they did not show him in his jumpsuit while he was at Greenpeace being arrested, right?
He was first elected in 2021, and he was Pierre Poilievre's justice critic until he was replaced in June. He's the 7th Conservative MP to leave Poilievre's caucus since the last election.
Oh, well, they just had to slip it in there. That is the 7th Conservative MP to leave Poilievre's caucus. He didn't leave the caucus. He resigned from politics. This was not a stab or an attack or anything against Poilievre. This was not a, I don't believe in your leadership, even though that's what the CBC is trying to push really hard. Massive misrepresentation as usual. But hey, had to link it to Poilievre. They just couldn't resist. So if you've enjoyed this report and would like to get yourself involved with the channel, aside from liking, sharing, hyping, commenting, and doing all the nice things, if you want to take it a step further and contribute financially so that maybe I can get myself another magic bag because my shoulder's killing me, I have a link in the description to Patreon. It's $8 a month and it helps support the channel. And if you'd rather do just a one-time donation, there's also a PayPal link. Everything is so greatly appreciated. You have no idea. Whenever it pops up on my phone that someone so courteously donated, I light up. It is incredible. And while I was in Spain, actually, I got a massive birthday gift, and I can't believe it. I won't even say how much, but I almost jumped from the hill I was on. That's how beautiful it was. But for the time being, everyone, if you haven't seen the last episode, I break down the Bishnoi gang and the controversial, the massive, the bombshell classified intelligence report that was leaked from the CBSA. You won't believe what these criminal organizations are using as a means of entry within Canada. Anyways, for the time being, I'm going to go enjoy my weekend or just lay down because I'm dying. And I'm going to see you next time.